All right, so this week we want to talk about John Lee Hooker, who, for my money, even though it would be really hard to choose, I would have to sit there and scratch my head and ponder and stare at my feet for quite a while. If I had to choose one blues artist that's my favorite, I think probably at the end of the day I might choose John Lee. Again, that I say that with a lot of asterisks and caveats and footnotes, but John Lee Hooker is certainly the one that I kind of identified with the most as a bass player when I first started playing. Um, and I don't know, something about him, just his presence, his sort of swagger, and just the grooves and the pocket of the bands that he's played with have always just kind of captured my attention. Specifically, we kind of want to talk about Endless Boogie from 1971, Hooker and Heat, which was another album with Canned Heat that came out the same year, and Never Get Out of These Blues Alive from 1972, which is the follow-up to Endless Boogie. But right off the bat, tell us a little bit about how you first became aware of him and kind of what John Lee Hooker, maybe what sets him apart as a blues artist for you.
Well, I agree. He's one of those blues guys. It's probably at the very absolute peak of if I had to make a blues list of favorites or influences on my life or my music listening. And really, it comes from a time and a place of when I was coming up into the music collecting and high school years and record collecting. And we loved Canned Heat. And Canned Heat Future Blues has just come out along the point of this story. And Canned Heat was coming to Spartanburg, South Carolina, about a 40-minute drive from where we live in Greenville. And your grandparents, my parents, kind of had things still under control for the short term. It didn't last very much longer. But in that instance, they did not allow me, and I didn't sneak out that particular time to go with these guys on a Wednesday night or something over Spartanburg. So they went to see Canned Heat. They came back with stories about some old black guy, blues singer, opened up and then sat in with him and did a thing called Boogie Chillin' at the end of the concert. And I was really upset that I had missed this. And it turned out it was a tour during the era of Hooker and Heat, and I had missed it because I was too tame to dispute the folks and make the run with my homies. So I became all the more excited about this Hooker and Heat, this Endless Boogie, the Canned Heat Future Blues.
Yeah, just for point of reference, his career can kind of be broken down like a lot of blues artists into a very early phase where he's solo, which I think
Yes.
both of us would agree is really great list. It is very cool. Worth checking out. It's a little more kind of what maybe people are used to hearing in the sort of Lightning Hopkins, Robert Johnson sort of solo blues guy with guitar kind of world, even though within that, he's still very much, to me, sounds like John Lee Hooker. And then, like you're saying, he kind of in the maybe late 60s, early 70s through Canned Heat and some other wise and notable rock stars that recognized he was, a music genius, and just his as an entertainer was incredible. He kind of embraced this electric style like many people did, which is kind of more what the two albums that we love sound like, where it's more drums, heavy bass. Both of us are kind of quietly obsessed with the obscure bass player Gino Skaggs.
Yes.
But yeah, that's so cool. So they essentially, it sounds like, saw the band before the album came out. They were probably touring with him, and then maybe they'd already recorded the album possibly before.
Definitely. I think so. 1969, I think. I'm not sure, but yeah, right along in that pocket. I would say two things too that, really coattail right onto what you're saying, is that there was both a movement and a reaction to it going on at the same time here, and sort of as the blues were evolving and up and through the rock era and the R&B and the electrification of everything, as well as the aficionados or the traditionalists in blues who had a disinterest in some of these movements. And they're both very fascinating. There was a lot of people early on through many years until recently that looked at Endless Boogie as a record as sort of a sellout and an eye roll and not a worthy John Lee Hooker record in the catalog, because they really wanted that stomp foot, searing electric blues solo sitting in a chair John Lee Hooker thing, or John Lee at least with a minimal rhythm section kind of back in the mix, and they wanted that thing. Whereas a lot of us of my age and my little gang of guys, we were really into this British blues thing. And there was a whole movement of these other records that were coming out all throughout this, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 year pocket of time. There was Sonny Boy Williamson and the Yardbirds. There was the Fleetwood Mac in Chicago right here, which put all these legendary American black bluesmen in the studio with Fleetwood Mac and some of their associates. And to me, it was a great record. There was, of course, the Hooker and Heat that came out. There was all those in London sessions records, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf in London, all that stuff. And for the most part, I think it was a really good thing. It brought these legendary musicians up a level into awareness with the rock audiences. And if you go back, a lot of this stuff really stands very strong. I mean, there's nothing wrong with authentic blues. I love Robert Johnson recordings and the early Muddy Waters, where it's all his gang. There's nothing rock about it. It's Muddy Waters in Chicago. I get all that, and I love it. But there's nothing wrong with this stuff. And this John Lee Hooker, Endless Boogie, and Canned Heat, to finish the rant, when they did Hooker and Heat, they talk about in the liner notes, if you look at it, they really worked hard on getting it right. They gave him the thing where he could tap his foot, and it was like a deep, clearly recorded sound. And they had the guitar and the amp mic where you could almost hear the tubes humming in that thing. When he did a fill on that hollow body guitar, man, it had a heat and a sting to it. It was just never recorded like that previously, in my opinion, for him. And they did the boogie stuff with him, but they also gave him a lot of room. He ruminated, the world today, did that John Lee Hooker philosophy thing, sitting in my dark room. On Endless Boogie, one of the things that we all love is that song in memory of Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, who had died not long before all this. Kick hit before hit kicks you. A farewell to Jimmy and to Janis. And he talks about, you got to stop shooting that needle and swallowing that LSD. The needle's too heavy, and these were truths, both as a drug message as well as a sadness of the time when, some of these iconic artists were losing it and dying from it, So John Lee was more than just whiskey and women, which of course he was, but I always loved that about him, his ruminations as well as his, simple chord boogies,
Yeah, he's one of the cards in his arsenal that he plays on his records throughout us. He's a great storyteller, kind of a la, I don't know if Woody Guthrie's the right reference on sort of the other side of the tracks from that generation, but he's a great storyteller. There are some cool moments. There's also some really cool acoustic moments on the Endless Boogie, where he talks about going to church and taking it to church, and it's kind of like super jam and super groovy. And there's like the slower blues stuff that I personally really enjoy, like the Standing at the Crossroads, or Sitting in My Dark Room Crying, are all like kind of deep, super like, just it's so slow, it's mind-boggling. And the way he commands those songs, his presence is incredible. And
yeah,
kind of
Boogie, is that the one you're going to mention next?
What's that?
The House Rent Boogie, the legendary storytelling one. That
all his stories are so charming and kind of,
my God,
they're kind of colorful, kind of funny. It's almost like he's bordering on kind of making you laugh with him a little bit. It kind of lightens the mood. I mean, if you think about it from sort of a quasi entertainment perspective, I mean, the blues can sometimes be very heavy. And also, one of the downsides of the genre can be a little monotonous if somebody doesn't find a way to change the mood or the tone or tell a different story rather than just the same old thing. And yeah, House Rent Boogie is kind of funny. He tells flipping out the back door because he didn't have all the rent. Things I've kind of ruminated on about John Lee is the fact that I don't know. In fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of the modern day hip hoppers maybe have never paid much attention to John Lee. Maybe they have. I have no way of knowing. But one thing that I see in my generation is just he is one of those people that really it's all about his presence and his command. voice in the same way that modern day rappers are. And also one of the things that sets his blues, for anyone who's never really heard John Lee maybe before, one of the things that sets his blues style apart specifically from a majority of other people is it's generally really kind of on one chord, and which is also kind of similar. It's kind of like a loop. It's almost like kind of early, hip hop. He kind of raps. He tells a lot of stories, like you're saying.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, the swagger and the rawness and the presence.
One of the other things I want to say about it with the time before we run the clock here is that if you talk about Endless Boogie, there is such a deep groove and vibe. It's almost sort of subterranean funk in disguise as a John Lee Hooker session with these rock guys. Those two together, and then with these keyboard players like Cliff Coulter and Mark Naftalin, that created a vibe that is just ungodly. I mean, the low notes and the pocket that Swank on drums and Gino Skaggs on bass put down is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just all in there. The way it was recorded is great. There's a few notes of like Steve Miller and some of these other guys playing a little bit of Echoplex and guitar effect thing from the rock world in there. But to me, it's real tasteful and really puts the heat up under what John Lee's trying to bring. And the last thing I'd say is for those of you who are rock historians, or, Carl Rattle and Jim Gordon are on this session. And basically that was Clapton's first solo band. Those are the guys from Derek and the Dominoes. They were on that iconic Delaney and Bonnie and Friends on Tour record. And they are on 2 or 3 tracks in one of the sessions, and it's really cool.
So yeah, for me, John Lee is just an artist that, past and present and probably future, just has a lot to offer. I think it's great listening. Endless Boogie and Never Get Out of These Blues Alive, as well as Hooker and Heat, are all like magnificently recorded. They sound to me like they're largely tracked all together because the grooves, like you were just saying, are so deep. I mean, the pocket, it's almost hypnotic. It's just unbelievable. The musicianship is incredible. And like I was saying earlier, I kind of feel like in a lot of ways there are some parallels between hip hop and rap, that came obviously later in the 80s and 90s came to be. And it just, if only in the sense of it's all about his voice. There's really only one chord. It's kind of all about the swagger and the presence of him as a storyteller. And for that, I just take a lot of reference to it. A lot of great bass lines. I just love the songs. Like we were saying before, the House Rent Boogie. Some of the songs where he tells stories are kind of, I don't say they're funny, like laugh out loud funny, but they kind of put a smile on your face, I would say. They're a little bit kind of coy or charming or something, His records are just so listenable. I mean, his whole catalog in general, but especially these two. There's acoustic songs. They just stand up to the test of time. And I think all the stuff that it spawned later, like we wanted to mention, there's a band out there now called Endless Boogie that's trying to keep that, kind of tradition alive, which, I would just raise a glass to that any day of the week.
And John Lee, to quote a line that he's done so many times every time he records the old song, a Boogie Chill, and he talks about laying down one night and heard my mama and papa say, my daddy told my mommy, let that boy boogie woogie. It's in him and it's got to come out. And that was kind of my story, and I really identified with it. And it's John Lee's story. He brings it, and we're all better for it. I'm so grateful for this record.
Yeah, he's definitely one of my core artists, especially in the blues genre. And also one thing to add in there is he did actually win some Grammys in his lifetime. We wanted to mention that. He's very much revered by Bonnie Raitt, who I think pretty much probably marched into some corner offices in the music industry and just demanded that they pay attention to him and give him what he already should have had probably decades before, really, realistically. But yeah, anyone out there that hasn't heard John Lee or hasn't checked him out recently, he's definitely worth a listen. John Lee Hooker.
Go get it.
Go get it.
Go get it.